Hi everybody, glad you can make it to the webinar today or tonight, depending on where you are. So I'm Paul, I'm from the Octopus team, and the purpose of this webinar is to really give you a bit of a look into some of the features that are coming in Octopus 2.4. If you've seen the blog post, some of them are probably pretty self-explanatory from the screenshots, but some of them I think are worth diving into in a lot more detail, and the purpose of this, I guess, is to show you the features in action, as well as to answer any questions that you have, which will help us to get the documentation up to date and so on. And one of the features I think is really big, and I'm actually looking for your help in making this into a really, really useful feature. So thanks very much for coming tonight. This webinar will be recorded. Nick Blumhart from our team is here as well, so if you have questions, there's a little questions box in your sort of GoToWebinar panel. You can ask them there. I'll try and read some of them out and answer them, and Nick will be answering some as well. So thanks very much. We'll get into it. So the biggest change that you'll notice as soon as you upgrade to 2.4 is the library tab. So it's been a long time since we've added any new top-level tabs to Octopus. This one came about because under the configuration section, we had a lot of admin-only things like managing database, managing the database backups, permissions management, that kind of thing. And then we had a lot of things that were sort of shared concerns of deployment. So the NuGet feeds that were being used, the library variable set, so the way that you reuse variables across multiple projects. So we wanted to move those things out, and the library tab is that place. So when you go to the library tab, the first thing you see is the built-in Octopus NuGet repository. So we introduced this a couple of releases ago, and it's basically the NuGet.Lucene open source NuGet server built into Octopus. But the nice thing about it is, as of 2.4, it integrates with our retention policies for releases. So if you have a release that's using different versions of a package, we'll keep the packages around, but once that release gets cleaned up as part of your retention policy, so will the package files. So it saves having to manage two different repositories if you want that behavior. So we're sort of pushing this as this is becoming more preferred than using external feeds. External feeds obviously still work all the same way, but you get a lot of permissions management and sort of maintenance benefits from using the built-in feed now. So you see the built-in feed. You can click through the packages to view different versions of a package. You can now, we introduced this a while ago, but as of 2.4 you can now select them, delete packages, and so on. You can also upload packages, which obviously you wouldn't do as part of your day-to-day application continuous delivery, but it's useful if you're building packages just to test with. So that's moved. The external feeds tab is where the old NuGet feeds used to be. So this is if you're using TeamCity or a FileShare as the place where you keep your packages. This is the place to go. And then we've got two new tabs. So script modules we'll dive into a little bit later, and step templates, which is a really, really cool feature that hopefully everyone will find really useful. So step templates. So sometimes, you know, when you first start using Octopus, you might set up some package steps and some script steps, and then at some point you have some success with that project and you start to create many more projects. But because of the nature of building applications in a company, a lot of the projects tend to have similar things they have to do during a deployment, and we didn't really have a great story for reusing those things. So step templates are effectively in the same way that library variable sets let you define variables that you're going to share between projects. Step templates lets you do that for deployment steps. So we can click on Add a Step Template in the top corner, and then you can choose any of our built-in step types, and you basically create these in a reusable way, and then you can reference them from your projects. So for example, if there's a standard email that you always want to send when a deployment finishes, you can define the template for that, and you'll be able to parameterize it as well. So this is one that I set up earlier. It's called Stop a Service, and it just runs a little bit of PowerShell to stop a given service. It takes parameters, and you can add multiple parameters to your script step. So this is anything that people are going to want to pass as arguments to your step. So for the email example, it might be the title or a short description or the name of the project. and then you would have sort of the rest of your body, and you would just reference that variable. So those parameters appear as part of the standard IntelliSense experience that we have there. So you go in and you set up these step templates. Then as part of your project definition, we can go in and we can click Add. And those step templates appear as just another thing that you can add to build out your deployment process. And so when we select that, instead of getting all the normal settings that you would get for that step, the only thing that you'll see are your parameters, as well as the context within which the step runs. So the names of the roles that the step is targeting, or the environments that it's going to run on, and so on. So this is a really cool thing, and basically allows you to create these reusable blocks of common deployment logic and then reference them from your projects. So we'll extend this process to use my stop a service step template. I'll give it a name. Save that guy. So that now becomes part of my process. When we reference a step template, we actually sort of copy the values from the definition into the process. So now if someone comes along and deletes that step template or makes a bunch of changes that aren't ready to be used, those changes won't affect this project straight away. So if we go back to the library and the step templates, we can go and edit the body of this one. I'll click Save for that. Go back to my project. And back on the Process tab, when I look at this step template now, I can see that this step template needs to be updated. So if at the moment, if I deployed this project or created a release and deployed it, I'd be running with the old version of the script. But when I click Update, it will pull in the new settings, including any new parameters. And then when I save it, it's going to run with the latest set of settings when I create a release and deploy it. So what's really interesting about this is we get a lot of questions from people who first start using Octopus around, like, can Octopus handle this scenario? You know, if I've got to remove machines from a specific kind of load balancer, or I want to open a VPN connection using a custom VPN client, you know, can Octopus handle those things? And the answer was always either write some PowerShell as a PowerShell script step and then copy and paste it between projects. But what we want to do with step templates is to start to build up not just you building your own step templates for use internally, but to build up a community-driven set of reusable templates so that if there's something that you want to do, we have a resource where we have all of these common steps. So if I go into my stop a service template, up here next to the Save button is an export link. And when I click that, it just gives us some JSON that we can copy out, which defines the step. So all of the settings, the name of it, and even the little bit of script. Back at the Step Templates tab, then once you've copied that, you know, to your clipboard, you can then import it and paste it back in. So firstly, this provides you, within your own installation, the ability to clone these or to share them between different Octopus servers that you might have. But more importantly, our goal is to have this site where you can go and say, I want to, deploy something to reporting services. Has anyone built that before? And you will be able to search for that, and hopefully someone will contribute a script to do that. We'll start to obviously build out a few of those ourselves, but we can't do all of them. So this is where I'm looking for your help, is to build out this library of reusable deployment components, and then people will be able to import those and use them. The nice part about doing this is, once you import a step template, you can then make changes to it. So if someone's written a really great step template for dealing with IIS application pools, for example, and it's kind of 90% perfect, but it's not quite there, you can just import it and then just go in and make your tweaks. So I hope that's a really cool feature, and you'll see some announcements on our blog about we'll set up a site where we'll be able to share these. We'll probably run a little fun competition to see who can contribute some step templates and make some really cool ones. But hopefully that's something that you'll find useful. So question through the questions panel, will you add the ability to add via a URL? we thought about different ways of exposing these templates, and we want to create something that's, I guess, just going to work for everybody to start with. So, one idea was that we would have a feed of, like a NuGet feed, where you could pull in a template that someone else had defined, but not all Octopus servers have direct internet connection, or not all browsers have direct connection. So probably what we'll start with is just the ability to, when you're looking at this central script repository or the step template repository, the ability to just click on a template, copy the definition to your clipboard, and then come into the import page and paste that in. And then, once we sort of get that working, then we'll look at other ways of integrating it. But that ability. Sorry, actually, is my audio back? Sorry, you pressed the mute button. So hopefully that's fixed now. Okay, so the next really cool feature that we built is PowerShell modules or script modules. So this is another tab that appears here, and basically this solves the problem of, when you've got a bunch of projects that all sort of need to do the same thing during a deployment, you typically would put all of that logic in a deploy.ps1 file. But then at some point you just end up copying these scripts and they start to get larger and larger. So the idea of script modules is they're basically PSM1 files. For those familiar with PowerShell, I'll go into one that I added before, where you define functions that can take any kinds of arguments. Any valid PowerShell can go here. And all those functions will be available on the tentacle when you reference them for you to invoke as part of your deployment process. So the way that you would do this previously is that you'd create some PowerShell modules, put them in a NuGet package, deploy that package to your machines to like a known location, and then in all your deployment scripts import that PowerShell module file. We basically take care of that for you. So it's a nice way to just create these reusable blocks of PowerShell scripts. So I create this function called say hello, which takes the name. I'll make that write hello, otherwise PowerShell complains there's only certain verbs that it likes to have as function names. I can then go to a project, and in the process tab I can go to configure and I can choose these script modules. And then basically any PowerShell scripts that we run within the context of this process, so any deploy.ps1 files, the deploy failed ps1 file, the PowerShell scripts steps that you add, including any step templates, and even actually, I don't know how many of you have seen this, sometimes you have NuGet packages that can't run, that for some reason you can't put a deploy.ps1 file in, perhaps because you're creating something that's going to be reusable. So a little while ago we added this ability to define your pre, post, and deploy.ps1 files as part of your NuGet package step. So this can sometimes be useful as an alternative to using the deploy.ps1 files. So these functions will be available from within here, and then once you've referenced it, you can then say, right, hello, whatever your function name is, some value, and we'll make sure that that module is there and that it's loaded when we execute the script. Yeah, so question about versioning of templates and modules. So for step templates, when you reference them from a project, we copy the definition in. Then when you make changes to it later, you've got to go back to the steps that are using it and import them, because sometimes you might have to kind of make a bug fix for one person, or for one team that's using your step template, but another team, they're just about to deploy to production. They really don't want you, touching anything that's going to be running there because they've been testing it for a long time. So that's the reason why we sort of copy the definition, and then you can go in and manually pull it in. And then, of course, because it's copied in, it's part of that, every release we create a snapshot of the deployment process, so you get the versioning aspects of step templates that way. PowerShell modules, I'm looking at Nick for an answer. I don't think that we version them. So we treat them the same way as the deployment process. They get snapshotted as well. So you sort of get the built-in versioning. We don't expose a lot of, so if you're not familiar, as part of creating a release, we create these snapshots. So you do have this kind of version control capability within Octopus. We don't expose a whole lot of history tracking for that. It's all audited, but there's no way to sort of easily go back in time and browse the different definitions, and that's something that we'll probably add later. So a question about, will it be possible to see which releases, I guess, and projects that are using the old step templates? At the moment, no. So the only way to find out if a step template is being used is to go into the project and go into the process and find a step that's using it, and then you'll see this orange update button to pull in any changes. In 2.5, we'll be adding the ability, so when you're looking at a step template, somewhere in here you'll be able to see a list of projects, and not just the project but also the specific step that's using that template, and then just click through and update it, or potentially some kind of update all buttons. It's only going to affect the project, though. It's not going to go, like if you've already created a release and deployed it to staging and you're about to deploy it to production, updating it this way is not going to go and update the release. It will just update the project definition, and then you'll have to go and either create a new release or update the previous release. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, so the next feature is Active Directory team support. So this was the one of the highest voted things on user voice for a long time, and we finally got around to it. So the idea here is just that when you have teams within Octopus, you can now link them to Active Directory groups. So I've made my Octopus administrators so that anyone in the domain users group in AD is automatically an Octopus administrator. Probably not a great idea for your production Octopus servers, but the nice thing about it is once you've done this, because users with AD accounts automatically get their Octopus account provisioned as soon as they hit the site, if they're in the right AD groups, then they automatically become part of the right Octopus group as well. So it helps for a lot of that provisioning stuff. It does require your domain controller to be online as part of the login process. So we would be really keen, if you do have a large AD installation, to give this 2.4 release a test and try this feature out, and just let us know if, we're not sure if we need to do a lot of caching around what groups a user is a member of. We do sort of cache them once a user logs in, but as part of the login process, we always go to the domain controller or check the groups. So we're really looking for feedback on if we should change the strategy there. Okay, the next feature, which is also new in 2.4, and I didn't mention in the blog post, is service accounts. So this isn't so useful if you're doing username password authentication, but it's really, really useful if you're using AD. So what we can do, well, the scenario, I guess, is that let's say that you've got a bunch of users who are in AD and they're logging into the Octopus portal to do things. But now you want to hook up TeamCity or something else that's going to use the Octopus API. But you don't want that to be a particular person or be a particular person's API key, because, what if they leave or something happens to their account, they get locked out or something, they're not going to be able to log in, and then potentially that API key is not going to work anymore. So what you can do now is create these sort of API key only users. So you give them a name, I might call it like package pusher, and say that it's a service account. We give it a little icon to highlight that it's a service account. And then from there you can click in and create an API key. Now if this looks new, we made a change a couple of releases ago to do a bit more security around how we deal with API keys. So like the guidance for if you're storing passwords in a database, for example, is don't store them in plain text, hash them and just store the hashed version. But a lot of apps for API keys just store the plain text version of the API key. And when you think about it, an API key is really just another kind of password. So what we do now is we actually hash the password, hash the API key. it's never saved in the Octopus database in plain text. We just store a PBKDF hashed version of it. And then when you use your API key to authenticate, we hash whatever you provide, and we compare it to the hash that we've got to work out, is that the valid API key, just like we do with passwords. Now, because of that, because we don't store it, there's no way to ever get that API key back. So once you generate an API key, you have to save it somewhere, or just keep creating new API keys each time you do it. So users can now have many API keys. So when I create this, I give it a purpose, so I can remember what that key was for in case I need to revoke it later. I get a value that I can then use, and I can go and paste that into my password manager, or just use it directly in the app. And then when I'm finished with it, I can delete the API key or create new ones and so on. So that becomes a user that can then do things but isn't tied, especially if you're using AD, to a particular AD user. You don't have to create these AD service accounts just to be able to get some integration going. So hopefully that'll be pretty useful. This is also a very commonly requested feature. In Octopus 1.6, we had this kind of system for managing permissions that was really, really powerful, but also really, really hard to use. It was sort of, if you've ever worked with like a list of firewall rules, it sort of worked the same way. You would say, people in this role can do this, but people in this role are denied from being able to do that. And then because you had allow and deny rules, the order was important and insanely powerful, but really difficult to use. We tried to simplify it in Octopus 2 by just introducing this concept of teams, where a team is a list of things a person can do, the context in which they can do it, so projects and environments, and the people that make up that team. But the roles that we defined, if I go to a different group, were of a fixed set, and we sort of defined, I guess, a set of roles that we thought would be useful to most people, but sometimes people need to be able to tweak it. So from the Teams page, in 2.4 you can now go to this roles link, and from here you can either add a custom role or edit the built-in ones. And then for a role there's a bunch of different permissions you can enable or disable. So Octopus, internally is only asserting on, does user X have this specific low-level permission? And then the way that you organize those into roles and assign them to teams is up to you. So hopefully that will be useful if you're doing any advanced stuff or have really large teams to manage. In Octopus 1.6, we used to run under IIS, and under IIS we got a lot of built-in authentication things like Windows authentication. So you get the kind of single sign-on experience if you're already on the domain. You don't have to retype your password all the time. For 2.0, we moved away from running Octopus in IIS, but we actually still run within http.sys, which is the kernel-level HTTP component in Windows. And it's the same thing that IIS is built on top of. So what we've done is we've re-enabled integrated Windows authentication. The way it works is when you hit the sign-in page, you can either choose to sign in with your current domain credentials. So if you're already on the domain, you're running an IE or another browser that supports that sort of single sign-on experience, you click the link and then you'll be sort of bounced to a page and bounced back. You won't have to enter your password. You can, however, still continue to log in by typing in the username and password, and that's still useful if for some strange reason this sign-in model isn't working. For example, some kind of Kerberos trust delegation related issue, or potentially if you want to log in as somebody else, which is fairly common. And then the last couple of things I'll talk about is the way that we generate release numbers now and the strategies around that. So in really old versions of Octopus, when you created a release, I'll just go and create one quickly, we look at the packages within your feed and we would guess what the version should be based on the highest available package version number. And it was a pretty simple strategy that worked for a lot of people. But sometimes you'd be deploying the same projects multiple times, or sometimes you would have a project that didn't use any packages, it just had script steps. And so what people wanted was the ability to auto-increment that. So we did that for Octopus too, but then some people still wanted the old behavior, and we couldn't kind of find something that was right. So what we do now is you can go to the Settings tab, and you can choose the strategy that you want to use. So you can either use an expression to say, take the last, first component of the version number and the last second component, but then increment the third part and use that as the third part of the version that I want. So this little pattern for how you want your version numbers to be defined when you go to that release page. So that can be really useful and save a lot of time. In here, if you want to always increment the first part, for example, then you just say use the next major instead of the last major. And obviously, if you haven't seen it, up here we have this help button. When you click that, you get a lot more context around a lot of these fields, and so here you get a lot more things that you can use as part of these expressions. But we're developers; we don't need to read the help. The other option you can choose is to say you want to use the version number of a specific package. So this is nice because it allows you to say, like, sometimes you might have a reusable package that you're using in a bunch of different projects, and it doesn't change that frequently. And then you've got like your main package, and you want to base your release number off the main package rather than the other one. So here you can go in and select that explicitly. So two different options there. The other thing we did on this page, you'll notice, is we've got this ability to assign a logo. So basically what we're finding is that when you're on this library page, it looks very similar to being inside a project. Like, it's got the same tabs down the bottom, a big green button up here, and so on. So now when you're looking inside projects, you'll see a little icon as you sort of navigate through the project to give you that context of the project, or the fact that you're inside a project. But what you can do is go and assign your own logo to appear up here, and if you've got a nice looking logo that represents your project that's going to be recognizable to people on your team, you can do that, and it'll just help to give them that little bit more context as to where they are within Octopus. Just going through some questions now. So do the release version numbers have to follow SEMVer, the semantic versioning format? And yes, they do. So it's basically the same validation that's used for NuGet package version numbers. And that's just because there are some parts of Octopus that depend on the ability to sort releases and work out which one is a higher number than another one. So we have to have some kind of fixed format. And yes, it does support pre-release tags. So in fact, I think back here, if we bring up the help, when you're using that option, you can say like -pre, for example, in your package numbers, and reference a few other things. So if I go to releases, for example, a common thing is, like, let's say I've created this release and I've deployed it to a few different environments, but I want to change it. You can go and create a new release using the same version numbers and just tag on something like revision 2 or some kind of tag, and that's fully supported, just like it is in NuGet package version numbers. So that's it from me as far as what I wanted to present. I think the biggest feature that we've added in this release is step templates, and I think it's a feature that we'll start to build some templates to make it like a usable feature, but it's the kind of feature that's really going to take off and become incredibly useful if you get involved as well and help us to create this library of useful step templates. So in the next few days, we'll be blogging a link to where that library lives. Contributing to it's going to be really easy. You'll just export your step template, fork the Git repository, paste in your template into a file, and send us a pull request. Should be really easy to collaborate with those on. So thanks everybody for coming. I'll stick around for the next 5 or 10 minutes if you do have any questions. Now's a great time to ask them in the little questions box. Otherwise, if you have anything you want to follow up with, just send me an email. Thanks. Yep. So somebody asked about if Octopus plans to support other languages. The main issue, I suppose, is that I don't speak very many other languages apart from a little bit of Greek from high school. I think Henrik speaks Swedish, so we could do a Swedish translation perhaps. Really, not that many people have asked us for a translation. If you want to email me, let me know the language that you'd be looking for, and or if you'd be willing to get involved or know anyone who might. It's definitely something we're open to doing. Okay, question, does your internal NuGet repository support picking up packages from a folder on the server? It does. So we keep the packages on disk. The place where we keep the packages, I don't think you can configure exactly where that is, but if you then right-click that folder and make it a file share, then you can publish packages up to it or copy them over. And we have this sort of indexer that runs in the background watching for changes, and we'll pull them in. So any ideas when this will be a public release? At the moment, so 2.42 is out available for download. We'll be making 2.43, which just has a couple of small bug fixes in it, available. And then assuming no other big problems come up, then we'll probably make it a stable release in the next week. The main thing we're a bit worried about is some of the changes around authentication. We'd hate to do a release where suddenly no one could log in, and that's where we're really looking for your help to pull down this version, give it a test, and let us know if it's working. And if it works, let us know, because that'll give us more confidence to make it a stable release if you want it out faster. Otherwise, yeah, hopefully within about a week or so. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody. This webinar has been recorded, so I'll post the recording on the blog soon. Thanks so much for coming along. Again, keep an eye out for the step template stuff. I'd really love to see your ideas on what kind of templates we should be building, or to see your contributions to it. If you do have any other questions, just send me an email or tweet me or something like that. Thanks.